Thanks, Clare. Minister, the question really is in relation to whether you're satisfied with the manner in which your Defence Forces personnel are currently being deployed on an almost daily basis now to do aid to civil power duties at Shannon Airport, and it particularly requests that you might address the issue of the so-called emergency landings of 2S very strange military aircraft which landed in February in clear breach of our neutrality and potentially endangering the lives of those Defence Forces personnel.
Thank you. Minister.
Yeah, well, this is an issue we've discussed at question time many times in the past, but An Garda Síochána has the primary responsibility for law and order, including the protection of the internal security of the state. And amongst the roles assigned to the Defence Forces is the provision of aid to civil power, which in practice means assisting An Garda Síochána when they're requested to do so. On occasions, the Defence Forces are deployed to Shannon Airport in the ATCP role to support An Garda Síochána. The decision to seek support from the Defence Forces is an operational matter for the Gardaí. In relation to the two emergency landings mentioned by the Deputy in her question, Defence Force personnel were deployed to Shannon Airport on both occasions. On the 28th of February last, Defence Forces personnel were deployed following an emergency landing of a US military aircraft. An emergency landing of the US military aircraft also took place on the 6th of March 2015. On this occasion, Defence Force personnel were already deployed to Shannon Airport for another aircraft at the time. Notwithstanding the emergency nature of both landings, the deployment of the Defence Forces in support of An Garda Síochána was in accordance with normal procedures, and there was no particular reason for me to discuss these matters with any ministerial colleagues. However, I am satisfied that there is ongoing and close liaison between An Garda Síochána and the Defence Forces, and between my department and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Justice, and equality regarding security matters generally, including the Defence Forces ATCP roles.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Clare Daly.
Well, as the Minister says, we have discussed this issue many times, but unfortunately we've never actually addressed the issues that are at the core of it, and maybe the Minister thinks by repeating the same banalities that we'll sort of give up and stop asking. I can assure you that that is certainly not going to happen. The reality here is that on the 28th of February, a US military aircraft, an EC-130H, which is described by the US military as an airborne tactical weapon system using a heavily modified version of the C-130 Hercules airframe, whose primary function is electronic warfare, suppression of enemy air defences and offensive counter-information. Now, how in God's name could that not be in breach of neutrality? And when we asked the questions between one of the four departments around this issue, having been kicked around on it, we were told that initially a different type of aircraft had sought permission to land 10 days previously, yet on the 28th of February they sought permission to land a normal Hercules plane on that day.
Thank you,
but suddenly a so-called emergency landed, and this plane, which is an entirely different animal, lands at Shannon Airport. Now, what I'd like to know, Minister, is how do you think, as Commander-in-Chief, as it were, of the Armed Forces, that it's acceptable for Defence Forces personnel to be called out to that scenario? And is it not your obligation, really, to discuss these matters with your colleagues in Foreign Affairs who are initiating an investigation into this about what the US military are in fact up to in Shannon?
Minister.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the details of the aircraft that landed, Deputy, with me here. But I mean, what I have is what I outlined to you, which is the dates on which emergency landings were sought and granted. But outside of that, I don't have any further details I can give you today.
Thank you, Deputy Clare
Because
Daly.
that was actually the question that you were asked here to deal with. Yes, it is. That your particular concerns about those two emergency landings. Well, so what you've said to the House is that you didn't really bother to go and get any information on that because you haven't got any information in front of you here. And what I'm putting to you back is that there were very peculiar circumstances around some of those landings, and you have an obligation to your personnel who were called out there to investigate that further and seek questions from your colleagues if it isn't just your ministerial responsibility. Now, I note that in the earlier answer you've said, and you gave the normal response about ATCP duties, but what I'd like you to clarify is it the case when your Defence Forces personnel are deployed to Shannon on an almost daily basis that they are always brought out at the request of An Garda Síochána? Is it the case that when they are there, they are answerable to the authority of An Garda Síochána, or do they have an independent authority accountable for their actions when they're there?
Final reply, Minister.
No, I mean, the Deputy, I'm sure, probably knows the answer to these questions. I mean, when we deploy to assist An Garda Síochána, who have the primary responsibility around security, we do that on request from, when I say we, the Defence Forces, respond to a request that comes from An Garda Síochána for assistance, and they provide that assistance. When a Defence Force unit arrives to assist, there's a lead officer there, and it is the responsibility of the lead officer within the Defence Forces to perform the task they're being asked to perform by An Garda Síochána. So the responsibility for the approach of the Defence Forces is the responsibility of the lead officer. That's my understanding, but that's in response to a request for assistance by An Garda Síochána, who obviously are the decision makers in terms of the calling for assistance from the Defence Forces in the first place.
Thank you, Minister.